"We can get 3 junior engineers for your salary," he said with a shrug, like he was reading off a grocery list instead of ending my 19-year career. Nothing personal, just cost-cutting. I was sitting in the same Portland office where I'd once slept on the floor to meet a launch deadline, where I'd written the back-end that still ran 80% of their operations. They were firing the guy who built the engine because someone younger could drive, but they forgot one thing. You don't remove the foundation and expect the building to stand. My name is Ryan Travers. I'm 48 years old, and for nearly 2 decades, I was the invisible architect of someone else's success. At least, until they decided I was too expensive. I was terminated on a rainy Thursday morning. "We're moving in a more agile direction," said Carl Brenner, the new Chief Innovation Officer. "And we need team members who can adapt faster." He was 34, wore sneakers with his suits, and used words like synergy and hypergrowth like they meant something. I'd been with Signify Systems for 19 years, helped take it from 5 employees in a WeWork basement in Oakland to a 300-person firm serving Fortune 500 clients across North America. I'd written most of our core backend in Python myself, built our custom DevOps pipelines, designed the container orchestration before Kubernetes was even popular. But none of that mattered anymore. They wanted fast, they wanted young, they wanted cheap. Carl handed me a severance folder with 2 months' pay and unused PTO. "Of course, we'd appreciate your support during the handoff," he added. "Our new team will need guidance on the legacy architecture." Legacy. That's what they called my work now. I didn't argue, didn't protest, just nodded and stood. "Thank you," I said, and meant it. I was thankful to be done. Because what they didn't know, what Carl never bothered to ask, was that the so-called legacy architecture wasn't a mess. It was a masterpiece, quiet, efficient, stable, built like an old ship, strong where it mattered, flexible where it needed to be, and only I knew how to steer it. I cleared out my office in under an hour. 19 years reduced to a single cardboard box, a few photos, a circuit board paperweight my daughter made me, and a signed copy of the mythical Man Month from an old mentor. No one met my eyes on the way out. The silence said everything. At home, my wife Julia handed me a mug of tea and sat with me on the porch. "What now?" I exhaled. "Something always turns up." She nodded, said nothing more. She knew me well enough not to push. 2 days later, I got the first call. It was from Arjun, one of the junior engineers Carl had hired to replace me. "Ryan, sorry to bother you. The new build system's throwing errors we can't trace. Deployment's failing. Carl says maybe you could consult for a day or 2. I declined, politely. 3 more calls came that week. Then a voicemail from Carl himself. "Listen, we're having trouble maintaining the container clusters. We'd be happy to pay your standard consulting rate." But I didn't have a standard rate. I didn't want their money. I wanted peace. And maybe, deep down, I wanted them to learn what happens when you fire the guy who built the ship without first asking where he hid the lifeboats. A month passed. I got back into running, repaired the deck, helped Julia paint the kitchen. And then an email came from someone I hadn't spoken to in years. Leah Min, CTO at Northbeam Cloudworks, a rival startup we used to compete with for contracts. "Heard what happened at Signify. We've admired your work for a long time. Would love to talk if you're open to helping us re-architect our infrastructure." We met at a cafe near Palo Alto. She didn't waste time. "We need someone who can build us something rock solid. Something that won't fall over the second we scale past 20,000 concurrent users." I smiled. "I've done that before." "I know," she said. pushing a job offer across the table. Chief Systems Architect, full autonomy, 25% higher than my Signify salary. And equity. I didn't hesitate. Meanwhile, Signify kept breaking. One day it was their billing API, then their CI/CD pipeline. Then client data not syncing between services. Arjun kept texting me updates even after I'd left him on read. They're scrambling. Production's down again. Carl says we're bringing in an outside consulting firm. The off-the-shelf replacement backend isn't scaling again. I said nothing. Not out of spite. Just clarity. They'd made a decision. Now they were learning the cost. At Northbeam, things moved fast, but smart. Leah trusted my judgment. We hired a team of senior engineers. I enforced a rule. Everything must be documented. No silent dependencies. No single points of failure. No shortcuts. I was building the system I'd always wanted to build, but never had the freedom to. And then one afternoon, 6 weeks into the job, Leah walked into my office with a strange look on her face. "You'll want to hear this," she said, closing the door. Signify had just lost their biggest client. They couldn't keep their SLA guarantees. Their systems had gone down for the third time in 2 months. The client, Red Belt Logistics, was shopping for a new provider, and they'd reached out to us. I blinked. "They're huge. 30% of Signify's revenue," she said. "If we land them, it'll make us the new industry leader overnight." She looked at me carefully. "Can we handle it?" I pulled up my architecture diagram. "Not yet, but in 10 weeks, we'll be ready." The next few weeks were a blur of work, diagrams, sprints, and long nights. We rewrote modules, tested load balancers, ran chaos tests. Meanwhile, Signify continued to flounder. Arjun finally quit. 3 more engineers followed. Carl fired the consulting firm and brought in a new one. Then came the email. From Carl. Subject line, "Let's talk. Ryan, I realize things didn't end well between us, but I'd appreciate a chance to reconnect. We're willing to offer you a full-time position again. Lead role. Competitive salary. Flexible terms, let me know." I didn't respond. 2 days later, he showed up at Northbeam's office. Reception buzzed my desk. "There's a Carl Brenner here to see you." I told them I wasn't available, because I wasn't, not anymore. We launched the Red Belt integration 2 days ahead of schedule. Seamless, stable, no dropped packets, no timeout errors, no scrambling engineers. Red Belt's CTO sent a short email. "This is the smoothest migration we've ever had. Thank you." A month later, Carl tried again. "Please, Ryan, our board is panicking. Red Belt's departure is public now. We're hemorrhaging clients. We're prepared to make you a partner. Anything you want." I replied once, just once. What I wanted was to be heard while I was still there. 3 weeks later, Northbeam quietly acquired Signify's remaining assets in a fire sale. Their brand was toxic. Their code base was unusable. Their people, the few good ones left, came over to us. I trained them myself. A year after my termination, I stood in the same conference room where I'd once been let go. Only now, it had Northbeam's logo on the wall. Leah introduced me as a new Chief Integration Officer. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt steady, like the foundation of a building that doesn't shake anymore. I spoke to the room about systems, about trust, about what happens when you build something right the first time. And when I finished, I saw faces looking back at me with something I'd never seen at Signify. Respect. Sometimes the best way to prove your worth isn't by fighting for a seat at someone else's table. It's by building your own and letting them come knocking when theirs collapses. Was I right to walk away? Even when they begged, offered more, promised everything they once denied me? Or should I have gone back just to show them what they lost? Honestly, what would you have done in my place? Let me know in the comments.